Will Trey McBride be a top 3 fantasy tight end next season? Can Evan Engram continue to dominate targets for the Jaguars? We debate our differences on the consensus 2024 tight end rankings on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst for NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL, fantasy, and betting for sportingnews.com. Hard to believe we're now less than 2 weeks away from the 2024 NFL Draft.
So excited for that. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. All right, so this week we have gone through the consensus rankings for running backs, wide receivers, and quarterbacks. So that leaves us with tight ends left. And actually, this year for tight ends, it actually looks interesting, right? For so long, we've had like 3 top guys, and if you don't get them, then you're just hoping for the best later on in your draft. But there are actually a lot of young tight ends that are exciting and a lot of good vets that actually showed out last year. So when we're going through these consensus tight end rankings and you're looking through them, what was the most egregious ranking for you in terms of all these guys?
Yeah, when I looked up, and we were used to a big 3 that has developed, it's usually Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews when healthy, and George Kittle are usually the big 3 that we're looking at among the veteran tight ends. Well, someone infiltrated that group, and Sam Laporta is actually number 1. I actually have less issues with that because of the season he had as a rookie, but I do have a question mark about Trey McBride. I think this is way aggressive. It's tight end 3. I know he's very productive last year, and this offense is the same. He's got the quarterback now, Kyler Murray, but we know what's coming. Marvin Harrison Jr. is coming. I think they could get another receiver in the draft, and he's just not going to be the go-to guy by default. Marquise Hollywood-Brown was hurt. Michael Wilson was a rookie and still kind of getting his feet wet. They were trying to figure out who do we want to keep in this offense. That doesn't say he's going to go away. He's in the similar offense to David Njoku in Cleveland, having Drew Petzing there. So when you look at that, yeah, he's not going to disappear. He's going to be very productive. He could be really second in the team in targets behind Marvin Harrison Jr., we assume, or Malik Neighbors and Roma Dinze. But I think it's going to be Harrison there dominating targets. Like if he's there, he's going to get like 150. I mean, that's just the truth here as a rookie, and that's why we're excited about him when he actually gets drafted to the Cardinals. So I look at McBride again. He's very good, but I'm not sure if he's going to be counted on to score enough times. I don't know what his volume is going to be like. And I think there was a big spike again because there was not much else last year. And again, if you get a new alpha, he's going to still be a top 12 tight end easily. I just see him more as like 8 or 9 to be a little bit more conservative here because, again, Mark Andrews is going to be back. He missed some time last year. He's fine. That offense is special. I think you look at George Kittle. We'll talk about him, and I'll bring him up in the next segment. He's been rocking it with Brock Purdy the last couple years. So he's an obstacle. Travis Kelce, we still know on a bad day is very good. You have Sam Laporta there at 1 again. I have less issues with that because I've seen Laporta produce consistently a little bit more than Trey McBride. So I get it, the hype. We want to focus on the young players. We've been waiting for the tight end position to kind of be rebooted and reloaded with these young guys. So I think that's a product of that. But McBride, to me, I'm not taking him as tight end 3.
I actually don't mind him at tight end 3. So I realize our names that we have in here. I think I'm choosing some that you don't like, and then all yours I'm kind of disagreeing with too. So we're going to have some disagreements on this show, and that's okay because we're talking about consensus rankings and how we agree or disagree with them. I'm actually fine with McBride being at tight end 3. So for me, it was less about them not having other options. Like, yeah, of course that spiked his target rate, but it was the offensive snaps that increased once Zach Ertz was gone, right? Like, his snap count was super low all the way up until week 8. And then it skyrocketed to 60, 50, like offensive snaps per game. And it stayed there. And it's going to stay there. He broke out. He's going to be the number 2 target in this offense. So yeah, I expect him to take Marvin Harrison Jr. or one of those top wide receivers if they end up moving down. They're going to get around 150 targets right away, but there's still nobody else on the team. And Kyler Murray's still going to throw the ball 500 times next year. There's still 350 targets to go around. Trey McBride still going to get his and be the number 2 target on this offense. And having a number 2 target in any offense as a tight end, that's plenty good enough. And he just dominated once he became the starter last year, was scoring nearly 15 points per game in PPR leagues from weeks 8 through 18, 6.6 receptions per game, 65.5 receiving yards per game. I'm really high on Trey McBride for next year. I gave you don't want to spend up tight end because tight end 3 also means like you're taking him over top wide receivers. So I understand that part. But in terms of like the tight end 3 ranking, I'm okay with. I'll say my guy that I thought was most egregious ranking was Evan Engram at tight end 8. That's too low. That's too low for a guy that got 143 targets last year. He was a tight end 4 in PPR scoring. The targets were most among tight ends by far. I mean, no one else had even close to him. He ranked 12th among all players in targets last year, all positions. He had more targets than guys like Chris Olave, Mike Evans, Calvin Ridley on his own team, Terry McLaurin, more than all of those guys. And there's no reason for that to go down this year. They got rid of they weren't able to keep Calvin Ridley. Doug Peterson loves tight ends. That's what we said. That's why people were getting high on Evan Engram when Doug Peterson got there the year prior. In the year prior, he was a tight end 7 in points per game. So we now have 2 good years from him. Last year, we saw it even take off more, and there's no reason for him not to get those targets. So tight end 8, too low. He should be ranked as a top 5 guy, especially in PPR leagues. If you're not playing in a PPR league and it's standard, then yeah, he's going to be much lower because he's not a touchdown guy. But in half PPR, full PPR, he's a top 5 tight end for me.
Yeah, I like him kind of where he is. I mean, I mentioned a lot of guys ahead of him that I like, and McBride is actually potentially one of them. Again, I like him at tight end 8 much more than Engram, and I think that's where you'll get the value with McBride. Like Evan Engram is just not exciting. I can't explain why. I know the numbers add up there, but he's not a guy that has the big touchdown games. He has an occasional spike, but I think that's about right for him. I don't think he's too low at all or too high. I think he's just right here, just based on some of the guys. Again, Laporta, I still would like McBride in that spot, but then you get the Kelsey, Andrews, and Kittle group there. I think that's opening the door for other people to jump in as well. We'll see what happens to TJ Hawkinson, right, and his health. So that actually might settle Ingram's value to be right where it should be at tight end 8. So there's a lot of things to consider here, and it's very difficult because I think it's going to be very close once you get past the few elite options, that these guys with their targets and production are going to be very close. And it's going to be hard to say this guy's going to definitely have more than this guy. But I think that also makes me say, wait a little bit this position if you're not going to get the elite options. And again, I'm fine with Ingram's ranking at 8. I think that's fair. Again, it's hard to differentiate some of these guys after the top. And it's a nice thing to have in fantasy because it means there's good depth at this position. All of a sudden, remember, it used to be you got to take a tight end early, get one of these elite guys, or you're waiting and trying to find a sleeper. But now the middle is a lot more juicy and just more desirable to go after.
So George Kittle gets all the love, right? But Evan Engram, it's like he is so much more consistent with his target. Like you can feel so much more better about putting him in because you know he's going to get the targets. They both don't score touchdowns. George Kittle has had one big year of touchdowns. Last year he had 6 touchdowns. 3 of them came in one game for Kittle. Kittle's insanely inconsistent. And I know you're in our next segment, you're going to argue that he's being drafted too low or his rankings too low. So I'm going to need you to tell me why you feel better about George Kittle than Evan Engram. We'll get into all of that right after the break. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. So, Vinny, tell me why that you think George Kittle at tight end 7 is too low, because I could not disagree with you more.
Well, he smashed it the last 2 years, and a fellow by the name of Brock Purdy walked in the door. And since he's connected with Brock Purdy, he's been very good. I mean, last year, look at it, overall scoring. I know you take away some of the injury games, but he was number 2. If you look at the average scoring, he was number 3. And then you look at the previous year in 2022, he was the second tight end to Travis Kelce overall in scoring. So he's really come on of late. And you talked about that big touchdown year. Well, it came just a couple years ago. And we look at this
The only
situation.
one in his career, though.
I know, but it came with the guy that's throwing him the ball, and he's got one more season with him. They do have good chemistry. He's put up his best numbers since early in his career when he, at that time, broke the receiving yardage record for a season. Now he's settled in as a big part of this offense a little bit more. And you also look at the potential. Brandon Ayuk still could be on the move, and that would be great with him and Deebo Samuel maybe taking over the targets. You're right. He's a little bit inconsistent because they use George Kittle in specific matchups. They kind of pick, okay, this is the matchup we're going to exploit. And we're going to go with that. It could be Deebo, it could be Ayuk, and then they roll with that after they run McCaffrey and do their thing. So, but I think what I like about Kittle, again, the Purdy thing is there, but I think I do like his big game potential a little bit more. And I think it's just maybe my perception, but I think he just is more exciting than Evan Engram. Like, he can take over a game at any point, where Evan Engram had that one game a couple of years ago. He had all those touchdowns and he was great. But yeah, I think if you want to go for that steady floor, maybe Evan Engram is there. But George Kittle, I mean, the numbers have spiked up into the top 3, 4. So I think this is a little bit conservative. I mean, things are not changing for him either, right? And Evan Engram, sure, lost Calvin Ridley, but I mean, the targets are going to probably be a little bit contained. I mean, it's the same thing that could happen here with George Kittle, that he's going to be the main guy when they're not looking at the wideout. So I do like also the potential. I mean, keep in mind, 2 years ago, we didn't have Purdy for a full season. Last year, it was a full year and they connected really well. So he's going to be his third season. He's going to be well settled. He's a veteran now with Kittle. So I think that's also going to help his consistency with targets and the trust downfield. So again, we want the 49ers to be in a little bit more shootouts there to help and throw the ball, but I just like Kittle a lot. And I think he's out to prove something a little bit more. He's now going to be 30, but I still think he has a lot left in the tank. And he has a chance to make the Hall of Fame if he has a few more good years. And I think he knows that. He's a tight end historian and guy that likes to be there. So I think he's going to be motivated to have a big, big year for the 49ers.
It has nothing to do with talent for George Kittle. You put George Kittle on the Chiefs and switch, with Kelce to the 49ers. Kittle's putting up Kelce's numbers if he's giving the opportunity. It's all about the situation he's in. And that's what makes him so insanely inconsistent. I hate those guys on my team, especially at tight end, where you just give me 10 points on a regular basis, please. And then also give me, I have some upside, right? I want some upside. I don't want nothing. But George Kittle there's just games where he gets 2 targets or just completely disappears because Kyle Shanahan's like, I have 1 million weapons. I don't have to force it to Kittle. There's too many people he has to compete with. And then when you're looking at a guy like Evan Engram, they're ranked pretty closely together. So this is who you're deciding with. He's competing with Christian Kirk. That's it at the moment. We'll see who they add. But Kittle is it's stacked there with, if Ayuk ends up getting traded, 100% Kittle's going to move up and I'm going to feel better about him. But it's so hard for him to even get 100 targets in this offense. Last year was 90. That's nearly half of what Evan Ingram's going to see, right? And yeah, Kittle's the way better overall tight end, but I just like the situation and the volume better for one guy. Now, my next big difference for the tight end, it's David Njoku. He's sitting at tight end 9. It's not necessarily even the tight end 9 ranking I'm hating on too much because it's like once you get to tight end 9 and 10, it's all meh. But the 75th overall, and I think that's just too high because you have to take him over guys like you're taking him over quarterbacks like Dak Prescott or Kyler Murray. You're taking him over running backs like Ramondre Stevenson or Joe Mixon or DeAndre Swift, Najee Harris, James Conner. Like, that's just craziness to me because I don't think David Njoku is going to be a difference maker in your tight end position in the slightest. His target share skyrocketed last year with Joe Flacco. Had nothing to do with the offense. It skyrocketed with Joe Flacco, who loves to use a tight end position. And games without Flacco last year, Njoku averaged just 10 fantasy points per game in full PPR, 44 receiving yards per game, had 2 touchdowns without Flacco. And then in the 5-game sample size with Flacco, skyrocketed to 18.2 fantasy points per game, 78 receiving yards per game, and had 4 touchdowns during that span. Like, this is the only time we've seen Njoku do anything in his career, really, on a consistent basis, was with Joe Flacco. We've had so many years of David Njoku now doing absolutely nothing. Last year with his career high 6 receiving touchdowns, 6. That's a career high. We are now in like his 9th. He's entering his 9th season in the NFL. Sorry, 8th. And again, 4 of those came with Joe Flacco in that span. I don't think David Njoku is going to do anything special, and you're taking him over like just guys that are going to help you so much at other positions. And just take Pat Fryermuth at 132 overall or Luke Musgrave at 153 overall. I think they have the same exact potential as David Njoku and just as risky, but you're getting them 60 picks later.
Yeah, with David Njoku, you're right. I mean, the Flacco thing was huge for his value. I mean, he had his biggest stretch in fantasy ever, and he's a good overall tight end. That's why they like him, that he does a lot of little things well, and he's available as a target there. But you look at now, you have Jerry Jeudy in the mix with Amari Cooper. Deshaun Watson is not necessarily a guy that's been locked into the tight end over his career. I know in Houston, they didn't really have that option all that much, but still, he's not a guy that he's looking to check down as much. And that's the biggest thing is Joe Flacco was old. He couldn't run. Watson's a guy who's, what is he doing? He's extending the plays, looking downfield, or he's taking off and running. And we talked about Ken Dorsey. Maybe that's the old school approach they'll go with. And keep in mind with Ken Dorsey last year, it was a grind until Joe Brady was there with Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox. It's like, why can't we get these guys going? And then all of a sudden, okay, we're using these guys. So he's not Dorsey the best at using the tight end as well. So different quarterback, different offense, more wide receiver help, potentially even more so in the draft. It all works against Njoku here. So easy to look at there. Now with the Kittle Engram thing, just going back to that a moment, like I think if you're looking specifically for game by game, I don't think either guy is that good for you, right? Like if you're looking for someone to just plug in your lineup every week and go in that direction, that's fine. I just don't think you're going to get that anymore with David Njoku. So that's the bottom line is I think that's where you start drawing the line. It was like, where am I going to go at tight end? Where do I want to have a cutoff? I think David Njoku might be that cutoff, right? Like I'm okay with Engram, Kittle, and McBride. We might shuffle them a little bit on the board, but we know we're going to get a tight end 1. It just may not come exactly like we want. It could be really inconsistent. It could be very limited, high floor, but limited ceiling. So I think David Njoku is neither of these things. So it's really hard to go after him. And I totally agree with you. I just have never been a guy into him. So it'll be interesting to see what he does again with a full season of Watson. This is going to be the first thing he gets. It's not going to duplicate the consistent targets he got from Flacco.
Yeah, I cannot imagine taking David Njoku at that price. If he was going in like the last round of the draft, maybe like if he was going with those other guys like Fryermuth and Luke Musgrave, but that ending of the season last year just skyrocketed his cost and just not worth it. Not worth it at all.
All right, here's a programming reminder for the network. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you Can't miss analysis, opinions, and news. Streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. All right. We are going to now talk about guys that we slightly disagree with overall. And interesting, I had a question about Trey McBride early in drafts. You have a rather big name as well that you're questioning his ranking.
I know, and it's silly, but it's Mark Andrews. He's tight end 4 right next to Trey McBride. Like, I'm sure they're going to switch on and off tight end 3, tight end 4, depending on who you're drafting with, right? And again, it's more about the overall pick, 44th overall pick. And my thing with Mark Andrews is we know the ceiling. It's right there with Travis Kelce, right? We saw in 2021, massive, massive year. That was with 153 targets. I don't know if he's ever going to get back to that kind of volume. He's had trouble staying healthy, right? And last year's injury was kind of a fluke thing. I don't want to hold that on him, but he plays through injury. That's great, but it's kind of been holding him back the last couple of years. And then again, I just don't think the targets he'll get 100 targets, but Zay Flowers, I think, is going to really step up in his second season, right? I think they add again to the wide receivers. Lamar is going to run the ball. They added Derrick Henry, who could steal a ton of touchdowns. Again, like that's what we saw last year, the running back stealing all the touchdowns. It didn't allow for Mark Andrews to score a ton of touchdowns or Lamar Jackson to pass for a ton of touchdowns. And there's no reason to think Derrick Henry is not going to put up double digit 12, 15. Like, would you be shocked if I said Derrick Henry had 15 rushing touchdowns next year? I won't. So that worries me, the touchdown production. And there's just guys later in the draft that I like better. Like I brought up Evan Engram. He's going later, a good couple of rounds later than Mark Andrews. And I think he sees just as much or many more targets than Mark Andrews. Touchdowns might not be there. Jake Ferguson, who's going to be probably the second target on his team as well. Tight end 10, going 5 rounds later. But when you're taking Mark Andrews, you're taking him over T. Higgins and George Pickens and Joe Mixon. Like, these are really, really good, solid guys. And I don't want to do that for someone that we just haven't seen that elite status of him since 2021. And I don't want to keep overpaying for him just because of that huge season 3 years ago.
And as
He's
we're
great.
waiting,
He's going to end as tight end, top 5 tight end. He is great. But I don't think we're going to see him as tight end 1 again, at least in 2024.
And as we're waiting for that, he's getting older. He's not getting any younger, and he's taking on more wear and tear. So, and I'm not saying again, I think what's happening here is because with finally some tight end depth and talent across the board, we feel comfortable fading these guys. And before that, we didn't because we knew the drop off was going to be insane. But now the drop off may not be as bad if you even go from an Andrews to McBride. So, I think it's kind of interesting because, again, we're fading some guys, but we're fading them in relation to other guys here that have maybe better values at the position. So I think the bottom line is across positions, you're just looking for the best value. You're looking for the most bang for your buck, the best return on your investment here. And at some point, if you get too rich with a tight end and pass up on other positions, you're just going to be a little left in the dark, and you could have got that same tight end production later. Now, I'm going to focus on the new Mark Andrews here, Michelle, as being too low. Brock Bowers, he's tight end 14. And you think, okay, this is pretty high. Rookie tight ends don't do a lot, but then we did see Sam Laporta break that trend last year. He was an elite tight end immediately for the Lions. Well, Brock Bowers, we have to see where he lands, but the Chargers are on the table. I think that would be a good landing spot. The Jets. Those look like the 2 best places for him right now. And if he goes to Chargers, who does he get? He gets Greg Roman, Mark Andrews, coordinator. And who do they have? Not much else at wide receiver at this very moment without Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. So this offense could develop in itself. I'm not saying Justin Herbert becomes Lamar Jackson in that running sense, but it could be the offensive concepts. We also know who else is in Los Angeles? Gus Edwards. So they're trying to maybe recreate some of this Ravens offense there. And if that's the case, Brock Bowers, if he's going early to the Chargers and they go there instead of a wide receiver, he's going to be the go-to guy all over the field. I mean, that's who they're going to trust most. I mean, that's what they did devising the offense for Andrews. And Bowers is like Andrews, where you would consider him, he's a bit of a hybrid wide receiver, kind of playing tight end. He's that athletic and that special. So I just think this rookie is just too good. And keep in mind, Kyle Pitts, through all the disappointment, he actually had a big year as a rookie in terms of yards. So he was still pretty valuable then. So we've had some rookie tight ends, Pitts and Laporta, do their thing here. So Bowers is just too good. And again, it kind of depends where he lands here. But if he's going to the Chargers, the Jets, even where they're limited, I know his other competition there will be Garrett Wilson and Brees Hall and now Mike Williams. But any of these situations, Brock Bowers is an in-demand guy, especially if you're going to take a tight end in the top 10.
Yeah, I think last year made us feel a lot better about taking rookies, right? With Sam Laporta's breakout, with Dalton Kincaid's breakout when he got the opportunity. We
Right.
saw good games from Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft. Like, it doesn't seem as scary now to rely on a rookie tight end. And if he's going to go top 15 overall, you would assume there's a lot of good landing spots, like you brought up, the Chargers or the Jets would be huge, or the Colts. Like, I would love that landing spot as well. So of course it comes down to landing spot. If he ends up being drafted by a team that has a veteran tight end, and it's really hard to beat those veteran tight ends because teams are so loyal, then maybe for 2024 it won't be as high. But if he lands in one of those spots, I think instantly he should be drafted as a top 8 guy, because again, I would much rather take the chance and the high upside with Brock Bowers than take a David Njoku, who
Yeah.
consistently for 8 years now has been nothing except when he played with Joe Flacco. So I like the Brock Bowers love here, and I hope he lands in a good spot. That is it for today's show. Thank you to you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Every dayers, Vinny and I will be back on Monday. Have a great weekend, everybody. Bye, y'all.